Welcome to the video, my precious princesses, my wonderful knights, and fabulous beings. Today I will continue to read Blood Bond by Lady's Days. We are currently on chapter 6. If you haven't heard the other chapters, please do so. If you would like to read this for yourself, I shall leave a link in the description below. Your fingers tapped against your arm gently as you looked in front of you, eyes squinting and trying to make a decision. You held a finger up, seeing if the painting matches up with the line of your finger, but you couldn't tell. The art, for all you knew, or at least could guess, seemed to be straight. But without a second opinion, or a second set of eyes, you couldn't tell. You sighed, eyes wandering to the sliding glass door. It had been 2 days, and still, he never came back. You had no idea where he ran off to, or if he was alright. But then again, he was over 400 years old and could take care of himself. Bakugo didn't need you to worry about him, and after all he said, you really weren't too keen on seeing him. Then again, you were worried. That half of you that came from her, and her worry for always shining through despite how the other half of you that came from him tried to convince you to harden your heart. People died, people got hurt, people left without so much as a warning. That's just how life was. So why bother worrying about them when they so clearly don't worry about you in return? The heart was meant to care for those who deserved it, wasn't it? Not for every single strange person off the street. At least that's what you tried to convince yourself, but it didn't always seem to work out that way. You were inclined to care. You were by nature a person who worried about others no matter how little you knew them. Your mind wandered back to the current reality when you heard a knock coming from your door. You shook the thoughts away and walked toward the entrance, pausing to look through the peephole before opening the door. With nearly 2 near-death experiences having occurred in the last week, you were being a bit more cautious at every turn. And with the slight paranoia having risen further since Bakugo left, you were definitely more prone to carry at least a stake on you now. Because you never knew who would show up next. To your luck, it appeared it was a friend this time around. Midori was standing outside your apartment door, shuffling a bit as he waited for you to open the door and allow him inside. You hummed to yourself, wondering if he was here to visit you or his childhood friend. Either way, you'd be happy for his company, as the last 2 days had been rather lonely. Uraraka had said she was busy with some work, and while Mina had dropped by to say hello yesterday, you were still not too familiar with her to call her anything other than an acquaintance. Plus, the pink-haired shapeshifter had some errands to run as well, it would appear, and she needed to leave as soon as she dropped off what she had made for you. Without another thought, you opened the door and waved to your friend who was looking back at you with a matching smile. He seemed a bit distracted, and even further antsy, however, causing you to look at him curiously as to what he could be hiding. Something in you saying it could be bigger than the fact that he was as old as Bakugo, and an alchemist who had created a legendary philosopher's stone. But after the week you've had, you wouldn't be surprised if yet another shock arrived. Sorry to drop by so suddenly, but someone was getting a bit impatient to see you. You blinked at Midoriya's words, and he rubbed the back of his head and chuckled softly. He slowly rose a hand up and pointed to his right, making your eyes wander to the unseen figure who had been waiting just outside your field of vision. You inhaled a long breath, realization crossing your face as you saw the familiar and aged face of someone you hadn't seen in nearly 10 years. But his mismatched hair colors and eye colors were too infamous for you to have not recognized him or assumed he was someone else. No, it was definitely him. Despite how his white locks were tossed over his red ones, nearly burying them, and that he was dressed in nearly all white himself, much different than 14-year-old him you had seen last. You were positive. "Shell!" you yelled, nearly plowing poor Midoriya down himself as you rushed towards Shoto. Todoroki blinked at your loud and excited tone. He had expected you to be excited to see him, but you were literally throwing yourself at him at this moment. And lucky for you both, Todoroki had always had good reflexes and had managed to toss his arms open right as you engulfed him in a warm, crushing hug. "It's good to see you again." He smiled gently. "Oh, come on, Shell!" you practically yelled, but quieted down, remembering that you did have neighbors. "It's been nearly 10 years. At least try to look excited." Todoroki nodded, letting you out of his arms as he mulled over what his next response should be. He was thrilled to see you, but like most things, he tended to keep to himself. But this was the one and only you, after all. So maybe he should try, for your sake. You and Midoriya watched as Todoroki's lips morphed into a sinister smile, and he held up a hand giving you a thumbs up. You laughed awkwardly, and Midoriya stiffened from the sight. A truly unholy one. "I'm very glad to see you. I was too impatient to wait another day," Todoroki spoke. I see that." You attempted to cover your laughter, and ushered the two boys inside. "Please, come in, both of you." The two followed you in. Todoroki glanced at Midoriya as if asking if his attempt at looking excited had gone off well, while poor Midoriya seemed to be trying to decide the best way to break the news to Todoroki that didn't exactly make it work. The boys were led to the couches, and you turned quickly to gather some snacks and drinks. You always tried to be a good host, even if it wasn't needed. You carried out a tray of lemonade and some cheese and crackers after a moment. "I was about to make a snack myself, so I hope you both don't mind." You smiled gently, passing out the glasses to each and then taking a seat in the single chair in your living room. "It's fine," Todoroki mumbled, picking up a cubed cheese and placing it inside his mouth before he ate. "Thank you for welcoming us so suddenly." "Please, both you and Midoriya are welcome anytime." Your face dropped a moment. "Though, I wasn't aware the two of you knew each other. Just how many secrets are you keeping from me, Midoriya?" You chuckled lightly as Midoriya lit up, nearly spitting lemonade over Todoroki and yourself. Todoroki rose a brow, glancing at Midoriya. I didn't mean to keep so many. I wasn't sure when the best time to tell you was, and besides, I wasn't sure if you knew of, other living beings other than humans." "You should have known, judging on who her father is," Todoroki mused, twirling the lemonade in the glass as if checking to see if you had poisoned it. "As for how we know each other, our mentors were rivals." Your eyes lit up under the fall lighting in your living room, turning to Midoriya. "Wait, your mentor is All Might, the greatest negotiator to ever live, the one who settled disputes between the forest and water nymphs, and the one who settled a place of half-humans among the supernatural community?" Midoriya rubbed the back of his neck softly, looking at his hands. "Yeah, Toshinori was great. And if it hadn't been for him, I wouldn't have learned all I did. But he needed to pass the stone on to someone, and I graciously decided to relieve him of his duties. He passed away peacefully a few years back. Nearly 800 years of keeping balance really wore him down." "So, You're basically the new negotiator between the human world and the beyond, huh? You nodded. Quite the role. And I imagine Todoroki is your hunter contact, huh? Oh, do you have a guide? If so, who? I so want to meet them. Calm down. Todoroki spoke gently, seeing as you had suddenly begun to act just like Midoriya in your excitement over this new information. You laughed awkwardly, ignoring the heat on your cheeks. Ah, sorry. I just grew up hearing all of All Might's exploits, and now learning you were his chosen successor is just really cool. It's fine, really. Midoriya waved his hands, glancing to Todoroki. I just had no idea you knew so much. Todoroki made it seem like he didn't. It's partly why I never said anything. No. Your voice trailed silently. I just don't like to think of the life he had planned for me, the ones they planned for us. Your father is out of your life, and I've been freed of mine, Todoroki mumbled, his grip on his glass increasing, a dull white light beginning to set in. Sho? You mumbled, seeing this. It's okay. He's not here, and you're among friends. Todoroki sucked in a deep breath. Yes, I know. I just... He quieted himself down, getting up and pointing to the long hallway. Bathroom? Yes, it's down that way. You spoke, trying to hide your worry in your voice. Thank you. I'll be right back. Todoroki's steps echoed off the walls, and you sighed, squeezing your palms together as you thought. It had been so long, and you would be lying if you said you hadn't wished for him to be finally free of the father he was born to. You never knew much of the obvious abuse, but you did know why Sho was so important to his father. Hey, Midoriya snapped you from your daze. Ah, yes, Midoriya? You looked at him. Kachan, he isn't here, is he? You shook your head and observed as Midoriya seemed to be slightly relieved by that. He must have been worried for his friend, though relief from seeing he was missing didn't seem exactly right to you either. Where did you get that painting? Midoriya asked, pointing to the new piece above your fireplace. Oh, that. You blinked, looking at the splatter art of red, white, and black. Mina gave it to me yesterday. Mina? Midoriya blinked. Oh, a friend of Bakugo's. She wanted to repay me for the treats and thought one of her paintings might work. You hummed, glancing at the art piece once more. I like it. I think it ties the room together nicely. Kacha-chan has friends? Living in the city? Midoriya mumbles, though it wasn't entirely missed by you. Yeah, a few of them. Why? No reason. He was just always a loner when we were kids. So, it's a bit strange to me that... Midoriya waved his hands and darted his vision to Todoroki, who was re-emerging from the back. I'm afraid we need to cut things short now, Todoroki spoke, walking towards you. Duty calls. You stood up right away, looking at Todoroki in shock. Don't tell me you... I'm not my father, but like you, I've always been interested in the world. Plus... You nodded as he lightly touched you with his mother's side. Todoroki nodded to Midoriya and he began to walk toward the door with him. You followed, wanting to say goodbye one last time. I'll be in the city for a while, so don't think I'm leaving just yet, Todoroki mumbled to you. I just have to make sure this place is safe for all living in it. Make sure to catch some bad ones then. You smiled softly, missing the glance of Todoroki that goes slightly south from your face. Oh, and stop by more often. We still need to catch up. Of course. Todoroki waved and turned away. Stay safe. Midoriya followed after his friend. I should be saying that to the both of you. He sighed, looking once more back at the sliding glass door behind you. Stay safe. All of you. You can't tell? He shouts, watching as the little girl next to him stares at him in shock. You can't tell anyone. He grips his hands tightly and grits his teeth as the cold feeling in half of his body slowly begins to tingle away. It hurts so much to use. If only he had better control over such power, such divine power blessed upon his small body. You're a... Don't say it either! He silences her, hatred pouring from his eyes. I'm the same as them. He pushes a hand onto his face, brushing away tears and swallowing air like he was starved for it. Eyes of silver and blue, refusing to meet her gaze. The last person he wanted to know, and the last one he needed to see that fear from the most. His mother had seen him for what he truly was, and marked him as such. No longer was he a monster disguised as a small child. Now everyone could see the evil that resided below the surface. Hey, her voice calls out, gently touching his head with her hand. Funny how she was at one point so much taller than he was. It's okay. You're my friend first, Sho. He hiccups back the shot, finally getting the courage to look up at her. She blinks slightly, seeing the burn mark for the first time as her small hand moves to wipe his red hair to the side. He watches her in nervous silence as she thinks of her next words. I don't care if you have a scar, or powers, or weird hair, she announces happily. You're Sho first, and Sho is my best friend. And you will always be my best friend, Sho. She holds out her hand, the cuts and scrapes having fully disappeared now. His touch having wiped away all pain and injury of mortal creation, and leaving her skin once more as sleek and untouched as it was meant to be. Slowly, he reaches out and connects his hand to hers. And as she squeezes him in reassurance, he decided then and there she would be his choice. And from now on, he would do whatever it takes to make sure she remains as pure and untouched as her fragile form was meant to be. Are you sure you want to do this? Midoriya mumbled, frowning deeply. He's been terrorizing not only her father, but her as well, Todoroki spoke, gripping his right side tightly. And since my father was the one that caused him to find her, I have to be the one to clean this mess up. But... Todoroki shook his head. You've done exactly what I asked you to, Midoriya. You and Uraraka both. Thank you for watching over her for me these past few years. But now... Midoriya nodded slowly, ignoring the feeling in his gut. Todoroki had a job to do. A job he was trained to do, with a power that was more developed than his own. And while Midoriya's personal feelings didn't want this to happen, he had a job to do as well. And if Kacchan truly was a vampire, Todoroki had been told about growing up and had committed all those terrible crimes, then it was Midoriya's job to allow hunters to take him out, all in the name of balance. His job was to keep the world in order, not to allow a monster to live because he shares the face of a dead childhood friend. The forest. Uraraka said he's in the forest, about 25 miles outside of the city. Todoroki nods. I'll be back soon. Until then. I know. Midoriya smiles toward his friend. I'll make sure they're safe and sound. Uraraka and I both. Todoroki nods and looks towards where he'll be heading, and then once more at the apartment building he had just came from. Finally he nods once more to Midoriya before walking swiftly away from him. You've never failed me before, Midoriya. He gulps down another sip, the dare in his grip relaxing from the toxins entering its system. He had no intentions of killing the poor thing, but he was hungry. He was becoming so hungry.
Suddenly, a painful burst breaks from his throat as he's forced to let go of the animal in his grasp. And as it dashes off to find a safe hiding spot from him, he violently lets the contents of his stomach drip into the forest grass. Bakugo groans, wiping away the blood from his mouth. Another failed attempt, and once again, it had ended violently. How much longer would this go on? He was starting to get desperate, and this was why he wasn't in the city to begin with. Fuck, he mumbles, finding some strength left in him to walk. The forest around him is silent, the oncoming night approaching rather soon. How long had he been out here now? A day? A week? Longer? He wasn't sure, as time wasn't exactly the biggest concern on his mind in this exact moment. He needed to find a source soon. As every moment passing, he felt it coming onto him. The bloodlust-filled drive in the back of his mind slowly taking over more and more of his thought patterns. Was he relapsing? Was he returning back to normal? This entire week had thrown him for a loop, making him realize the large difference between human him and vampire him, and how, by some miracle or curse, the two were beginning to become one. And he was terrified what that meant for the life he had so been used to living, and if this was permanent. The warmth in him was too overwhelming, and he was beginning to get annoyed by it. However, at this moment, it wasn't the metaphorical heat that was eating away at him, but rather the actual heat on his back. Shit! He cursed and moved away as a figure attempted to nab him. Bakugo rolled to the side, showing off the protruding fangs, hoping to scare off whatever idiot had picked a fight with a vampire. However, at the strange-looking boy who appeared to be around the same age looking at him with dull silver and blue eyes. You were much harder to track down than I thought, he speaks, tossing his white locks back over his red ones, hiding them away. Though, my tracking skills are very up to par with your rivals. Bakugo smirks, gripping a fist. Aw, what are you, the old man's student? No, just someone who merely knew of him, but stands for his ideas. Bakugo laughs quietly. Well, let's see if a rookie like you has what it takes. I was craving a fight. Bakugo lunges forward, ready to use all he had in him to deliver a good blow to this half-and-half jerk's stomach. It would send this hunter flying, and he would be able to make his retreat. He hated to admit it, but he was in no shape to fight. He was down on strength and needed to get himself fed, and fast. So lost in his own thoughts and worries for himself, Bakugo didn't notice until too late when the hunter's hand enveloped into a white light. He pulled back just in time for the hunter's hand to lightly graze his thumb. And the moment it did, the finger was burned from the inside with the white light and spread continually until the entire hand was covered in vein-like white lights. The white light felt like poison in his veins, and as Bakugo cried out in sheer pain, the bastard of a hunter simply stood there and watched him. And then, the light disappeared, but not before allowing his entire hand to burst from the inside out. Blood dripped out and the skin turned black. The effect was gone, but it left a major effect on him. What the hell? He mumbled, looking at the red and white-haired boy who was allowing his right side to once again glow white. You've committed sin before, and the more you've committed, the worse your injuries will be. He spoke, rushing forward and aiming for the vampire's head. You will be punished for what you did to her. I won't stand for anyone who wishes to cause her harm. Bakugo used his leg to nail the hunter in his left side. He fell down with a thud, right side touching his left as he did so. Bakugo watched as his own left side began to emit the same white light veins he had moments before. They were thick on this hunter and seemed to cause him a lot of pain. Fucking crazy, he laughed. Your human side ain't immune to your angelic side, huh? The boy glared back at him, rising to his feet. The pain was obvious. However, much to Bakugo's shock, another light rose, this time engulfing his entire body and not just his right side. And when the light faded, every little bruise, cut, or white light had vanished. Bakugo gritted his teeth, seeing as he was majorly screwed right now, and that unless he wanted to die tonight, he needed to retreat from this half-angel and fast. Seeing as whatever healing spell was used resulted in making the hunter unable to move momentarily, Bakugo shot off into the air, using his last bits of strength to jump away. His fall was much rougher, as he was finally drained all of his supernatural strength. He fell onto a tree, it luckily breaking his fall as his butt hit the ground once more. He breathed out and looked at his hand, seeing as it was healed slightly, but still fairly damaged. That bastard would be looking for him, and right now he was a sitting duck. He needed to get up and move. If he could get back to that shitty sex demon, he could be under a shielding spell. He had to at least make it to then, and before he lost. How long has it been now? 6 days? 7? A sickly voice asked him. You know, you won't be able to last much longer like this. Shut up, he muttered, closing his eyes and ignoring the voice coming from the direction in front of him. What's wrong, Katsuki? She cooed, a fragile and delicate hand running through his tousled locks. It hurts, doesn't it? And you and I both know why. He growled loudly, slapping her hand away. His eyes rose up from the ground, looking at the feet of the person who had found him in such a pathetic state. Her shoes standing so near him with the ends of her pastel red dress showing off a bit of her knees to him. His eyes looked at her exposed skin, the dryness of his throat becoming more irritated. And I also know why you can't drink anymore. She spoke again, lifting his head to trail up her body until their eyes met. Bakugo gritted his teeth. As dull eyes looked at him, head tilting to the side. She smiled at him as her hand gently caressed her face, making the male part his lips slightly at her actions. His body leaning forward a bit more towards her, the scent overwhelming, and the feeling of her warmth overflowing through the scent of her soft touches. Who would have ever thought you'd be reduced to such a little bitch, all because of a girl, a human girl, born biologically to your greatest enemy, and raised to hate every single particle of you at that. It's cruel. You've always had such a cruel fate. She turned away from his reaching hands, instead opting to quickly turn behind a tree. Bakugo rose to his feet, erratically turning the corner after her in a panic, looking for the form he had come to recognize these last few days. You've never gone past 3 days before. You've always been so good to make sure, she muttered in his ear, arms snaking around his waist, slowly before connecting and squeezing his core. Why is that? You've had plenty to drink. Hospital blood, animal blood. So why does your body keep rejecting it? I wonder. Where's that usual bite, Katsuki? Has your tongue become as weak as your body? Are the withdrawals worse than you thought? This is the first time you've started to feel them, right? The mind goes first, but not before you slowly feel the body fading away. This would have never happened if you didn't fucking exist. Blaming me? I think you're forgetting you're the one who chose to have some of my blood in the first place. Well, I didn't plan for this to happen. You were never supposed to be my He slammed his mouth shut, refusing to mutter that word. Once he acknowledged it, it would be over for him. The arms around his torso loosened and she snaked around to look at him, eyes curious towards the cat holding his tongue. You can't say it? Or do you refuse to say it? A coy smirk etched onto their lips, eyes gleaming in mischief. What's so bad about admitting that I'm yours and yours alone? What's the harm in it? You need me for your very existence now, remember? I don't need you, and I'll damn prove it, he barked, slapping away their hand that once again reached forward to him. I... You feel it, don't you? The craving. She smiled sweetly. Pretty soon, the only thing on your mind will be me, and you'll stop at nothing to get me. And when you do, I'm sure you'll finally give in. I don't need you. I never needed you before, and I won't need you now. I can control myself. He pushed her harshly, turning to get away while she was down. He was much faster than her, even if he was malnourished at this moment. He was still fast. And as he passed by yet another tree, resting a moment and trying to ease his burning body, the figure reemerged, looking as if they had been waiting for him there. Bakugo stepped back, colliding with the tree and trapping him between the person and the wooden trunk. They got closer to him than they had before, their lips nearly touching his, their breaths mixing together from the small distance. Control? Since when did you regain that? They sniggered. My. Don't tell me I remind you of your long-forgotten humanity, did I? Because, if I recall correctly, you had no issue giving in to that inhuman part of you before, completely erasing that small, curious, and prideful boy from all those centuries ago. And yet, the moment you had a little taste of me, you've stopped. You haven't thought about killing or harming anyone, human, hunter, or supernatural beast. And I think some part deep down inside of you was happy to finally be able to relax and once again have a place to call home. But you're so bad at listening to your heart, Katsuki. And this isn't because of those little pricks on your neck. You were a terribly flawed human, and so you became a vicious monster, right? So why try to control yourself now? For my sake? Because you're recalling what you once were? I'm not. I haven't changed. Stop feeding me this bullshit, he cursed, trying to move again, but they were too quick. Their legs sticking out enough to catch his leg and sending him falling onto his side and into the grass beneath him. He coughed, throat burning with an intense burst of heat and dryness, making his fists ball up the blades under his skin. So out of it, when they began to move him onto his back, he had no fight left in him. They trapped him underneath them, staring down at him. Him as the prey for once, and them as the predator. He closed his eyes, the pain increasing as the seconds slowly ticked by. His fangs protruded without his doing, begging to bite the nearest piece of flesh and satisfy this intense thirst. It's okay, Katsuki. She nuzzled her face into his neck, cheeks brushing up against his marks. Let go. You don't have to keep fighting anymore. I can't. They chuckled a few more times, strands of hair tickling his skin. Nonsense. You put up a good fight, and now you can come and claim your reward. Reward? Yes, it's me, right? They smiled, seeing his eyes lazily look them over, a budding gaze of lust entering his scarlet hues. I've always been what you wanted. Someone who would never leave or hurt you, right? Funny how it turned out to be me. To be your fated, right? He reached forward, attempting to grab them, wanting to embrace what his body and mind wanted more than anything at this moment. But the moment his hands collided with their shoulders, they vanished. He immediately widened his eyes, crawling on his knees and looking around desperately. He needed them. You want me now, right? The voice echoed and bounced off the trees. Well, you know how to find me. You've done it before. And now, you have your drive back, right, Katsuki? He stumbled to his feet, lips etched into a deep smirk as his eyes widened at the idea he was coming to. Thanks to their motivation. Like a little game of cat and mouse, right? That's what they wanted. They wanted him to find them again, and not let anyone stand in his way. Hide while you can, because when I find you, I'm going to have all kinds of fun.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed your time here, please be sure to like the video. If you would care to hear more, please consider subscribing. And farewell for now, my loves.